The evening sky had just begun to darken over Pine Ridge as Anthony and Devin finished their paperwork at the station. They'd been partners for nearly 12 years now, working the same ambulance shift in this neighborhood they both called home. The clock on the wall read 6:43 p.m., 17 minutes until the end of their shift. "Think we might actually get out of here on time today?" Anthony asked, not looking up from his report as he filled in the last details from their previous call. A minor car accident, nothing serious. The kind of routine call that made up most of their days. Devin laughed and shook his head. "Man, don't jinx us. Last time you said that we ended up working 3 hours overtime on that apartment fire." The station was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional crackle of the radio. 3 other paramedics lounged in the break room watching a basketball game, their voices rising occasionally when someone scored. The smell of microwave popcorn drifted through the hallway. Anthony stretched, feeling the tightness in his shoulders from carrying equipment up 4 flights of stairs earlier that day. At 42, he sometimes felt every one of his 15 years on the job in his knees and back. He glanced over at his partner who, despite being only 2 years younger, seemed to bounce back quicker after tough calls. "Got plans tonight?" Anthony asked, closing the folder and sliding it into the completed pile. "Just helping my nephew with his science project. Kid's trying to build some kind of volcano that actually erupts." Devin grinned, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Knowing him, we might end up with lava all over my sister's kitchen." The radio suddenly crackled to life, cutting through their conversation. "Dispatch to Unit 17. Devin reached for the radio, pressing the button with a practiced motion. "Unit 17, go ahead, dispatch. We have a report of a child down at Maple Community Park, possible severe allergic reaction. 9-year-old male reported unconscious. Caller states the boy was eating at a birthday party when he suddenly couldn't breathe." Anthony was already on his feet, grabbing his jacket from the back of his chair. 12 years working together meant they moved like a single unit, anticipating each other's movements without words. Unit 17 responding. "ETA 5 minutes, Devin replied, his voice shifting into the calm, professional tone he always used on calls. They hurried through the station, past the break room where their colleagues were already standing, knowing from the sound of running feet that a call had come in. "Kid with allergic reaction," Anthony called out as they passed. "We've got it." Outside, the early October air felt cool after the warmth of the station. The ambulance waited in its bay, cleaned and restocked after their last call. Anthony took the driver's seat while Devin climbed into the passenger side, already pulling up the exact location of Maple Park on the GPS. "Take Hampton Road," Devin suggested as Anthony started the engine. Construction still blocking the main entrance. The siren wailed to life as they pulled out of the station. Anthony felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, his heart rate picking up as he navigated through evening traffic. Cars pulled to the side as the ambulance approached, though a few drivers seemed oblivious until the last moment. "People got their music too loud," Anthony muttered, swerving around a sedan that had frozen in the middle of the lane. "Can't hear a siren 5 feet behind them." 6 o'clock on a Friday, Devin replied, bracing himself against the dashboard as they took a corner. Everyone's in a hurry to start their weekend. In the back of his mind, Anthony was already running through protocols for pediatric anaphylaxis. Epinephrine would be first line, possibly intubation if the airway was compromised. They'd need to get IV access quickly. A 9-year-old would be around 60 to 70 pounds. He mentally calculated medication dosages based on estimated weight. "Dispatch, any update on patient status?" Devin asked into the radio. "Caller reports the child is still breathing but having significant difficulty. They're attempting to use an EpiPen but aren't sure if they're doing it correctly." Anthony exchanged a quick glance with Devin. At least the child had an EpiPen available. That meant someone knew about an existing allergy. But improper administration might mean the medication wasn't effective. "Almost there," Anthony said, spotting the park entrance ahead. The evening was warm enough that the park was still busy. Families packing up picnics, teenagers playing basketball on the courts, dog walkers strolling along the paths. He could see a small crowd gathered near the central pavilion, several people waving their arms as the ambulance approached. Anthony pulled as close as possible, the tires bumping over the grass. They were out of the vehicle in seconds, grabbing their equipment bags. The crowd parted as they approached, revealing a small boy lying on a picnic table. A woman, likely his mother, was bent over him, her face streaked with tears. Please help him, she gasped as they approached. His throat just started swelling up. We used his EpiPen, but he's not getting better. Anthony knelt beside the boy while Devin gently moved the mother aside. The child's face was swollen, his lips tinged blue. His breathing was labored, coming in short, wheezing gasps. Hey, buddy, Anthony said softly, though he wasn't sure if the boy could hear him. We're going to help you breathe better, okay? He looked at the mother. What's his name? Tyler, she replied, her voice shaking. He's allergic to peanuts. There weren't supposed to be any in the food, but... She broke off, pressing her hand to her mouth. Devin was already checking vital signs, his movements quick but steady. Pulse rapid and thready, blood pressure's dropping. Hodu sat at 83%. Let's get another dose of Epi on board and start him on oxygen, Anthony said, opening their medication kit. When was the EpiPen administered? About 10 minutes ago, answered a man standing nearby. I helped them use it, but I think it might have been expired. That explained the limited response. Anthony quickly prepared the epinephrine, while Devin placed an oxygen mask over Tyler's face. The boy's eyes fluttered open briefly, filled with fear. You're doing great, Tyler, Anthony reassured him. Just try to stay calm and breathe with the mask. We're going to make you feel better. As Anthony administered the medication, he could feel dozens of eyes on him. Birthday party guests, other park visitors, all watching in tense silence. A little girl was crying softly, being comforted by an older child who kept whispering, It's okay. The ambulance people are here now. The responsibility of those moments never got easier, even after 15 years. A child's life in his hands, a community watching, waiting for him to make everything right again. We need to get him to the hospital, Devin said, already preparing the stretcher. Mom, you can ride with us. Tyler's mother nodded, gathering her purse with shaking hands. His father's already driving to the hospital, she said. He was at work when I called. It took them less than 2 minutes to transfer Tyler onto the stretcher. The oxygen was helping, but his breathing remained labored. Anthony noted with concern that the swelling hadn't decreased significantly yet. They'd need to watch closely for airway compromise during transport. As they wheeled Tyler toward the ambulance, Devin briefed the mother on what would happen next. Anthony could hear the calm in his partner's voice, the steady reassurance that had helped countless families through their worst moments. The medication we gave him should start working very soon. We're going to keep monitoring him and give him additional treatment if needed. Children's Hospital is only 7 minutes away. Anthony was about to load the stretcher when he noticed a police cruiser pulling into the park, lights flashing but no siren. Probably responding to the same call. Sometimes dispatch sent police to medical emergencies, especially those involving children. He turned his attention back to Tyler, noting with relief that the boy's oxygen levels had improved slightly. The epinephrine was beginning to work. Still, they needed to move quickly. Anaphylaxis could be unpredictable, with symptoms sometimes returning after initial improvement. Let's get rolling, he called to Devin, who nodded and finished helping Tyler's mother into the ambulance. Neither of them could have known that the arriving police officer would change everything about this call. That in just minutes their focus would be forcibly shifted from saving a child's life to defending their right to do their jobs. That this routine emergency response would become something that would shake their community to its core. But for now, they were simply two paramedics focused entirely on the small boy struggling to breathe, determined to get him safely to the hospital. For now, all that mattered was keeping Tyler alive. As Anthony climbed into the driver's seat once more, he caught a glimpse of the setting sun through the trees, painting the sky in brilliant orange and purple. Another day nearly done, another life hanging in the balance. Just like any other shift until suddenly it wasn't. Anthony's hands gripped the steering wheel as he navigated the ambulance through the park's winding paths. Behind him, Devin was already in the patient compartment with Tyler and his mother starting treatment. Through the small window connecting the cab to the back, Anthony could hear the urgent beeping of monitoring equipment and Devin's calm voice giving instructions. We're 3 minutes from Children's Hospital, Anthony called back. How's he doing? Oxygen's at 87%. Still too low but improving, Devin replied, his voice steady despite the tension. The swelling hasn't gone down enough yet. I'm prepping a second dose of EPI. Anthony focused on the road, weaving around a delivery truck that had failed to pull completely to the side. Every second counted now. He'd seen anaphylaxis progress from bad to critical in minutes. especially in children whose smaller airways could close more quickly than adults. In the back, Devin worked methodically, his movements quick but precise. Tyler lay on the stretcher, his small chest rising and falling with labored breaths. The oxygen mask covered most of his face, but Devin could see the fear in the boy's eyes. Beside him, Tyler's mother sat clutching her son's hand, her face a mask of barely contained panic. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked, her voice breaking. Devin met her eyes briefly as he checked Tyler's blood pressure again. "We're doing everything we can. The medication is starting to work, but his body's having a severe reaction."
"Has this happened before?"
She nodded. "Once when he was 5. But not this bad. We've been so careful." "Sometimes reactions get worse with each exposure," Devin explained, adjusting the oxygen flow. He looked down at Tyler, whose eyes were fixed on him. "Hey buddy, I know it's scary not being able to breathe well, but you're doing great. Just keep taking slow breaths through the mask." Tyler blinked in response, unable to speak but clearly understanding. His hand squeezed his mother's a little tighter. Devin checked the monitor again and frowned slightly. Despite the epinephrine, Tyler's oxygen saturation wasn't improving as quickly as he'd hoped. He prepared the second dose, carefully drawing up the correct amount for Tyler's weight. "I'm giving him more medicine to help open his airway," he explained to both Tyler and his mother. "It might make his heart beat faster, which might feel a little scary, but that's normal." As he administered the medication, Devin felt the ambulance slow slightly. Through the window, he could see they were approaching a red light. Anthony turned on the air horn, alerting cross-traffic to their emergency approach. Tyler suddenly gripped his mother's hand tighter, his chest heaving as he struggled for air. "His stats are dropping," Devin called to Anthony, keeping his voice level to avoid alarming Tyler further. "We need to move faster." Anthony didn't respond verbally, but the ambulance accelerated, siren wailing as they pushed through the intersection. In the back, Devin made a quick decision. "I'm going to start an IV. He might need additional medications when we get to the hospital, and having access already established will save time." He worked quickly, gathering supplies while keeping a constant eye on the monitors. Finding a vein in a child during an emergency wasn't easy, especially with Tyler's blood pressure dropping. "Tyler, I need to put a tiny tube in your arm so we can give you medicine at the hospital. It's going to feel like a quick pinch, but then it'll be over," Devin explained, tying a tourniquet around the boy's upper arm. Tyler's mother leaned close to her son's ear. "Remember how brave you were when you broke your arm last year? You can do this too." Devin found a vein on his first attempt, a small victory in the midst of crisis. He secured the IV and connected a bag of fluids, then checked Tyler's vital signs again. The second dose of epinephrine was beginning to work. Tyler's oxygen levels had improved to 90%. "That's better," Devin said with genuine relief. "Keep breathing nice and steady, Tyler." The ambulance made a sharp turn and Devin braced himself against the wall to stay upright. They were getting close to the hospital now. He began preparing his handoff report in his head, all the information the emergency department team would need when they arrived. "Almost there," Anthony called from the front. "ED knows we're coming. They've got a room ready." Devin nodded and turned to Tyler's mother. "When we arrive, things will happen very fast. The hospital team will take Tyler straight to a treatment room. They'll probably ask you about his medical history and any medications he's taking." "He has asthma too," she said. "Could that be making this worse?" "It might be contributing," Devin acknowledged. "Make sure to tell them that." The ambulance slowed as they approached the hospital's emergency entrance. Devin could see the automatic doors already open, a team of medical staff waiting outside. Despite 12 years on the job, he always felt a surge of relief seeing the hospital, like passing a baton in a relay race, sharing the weight of responsibility. As they pulled to a stop, Devin did one final check of Tyler's vital signs. BP is still low but stabilizing. Oxygen at 91%. Airway still compromised but responding to treatment. The back doors of the ambulance swung open. A doctor in blue scrubs stepped forward, already pulling on exam gloves. "What have we got?" she asked briskly. 9-year-old male, severe anaphylactic reaction to peanuts, Devin reported, helping guide the stretcher out of the ambulance. 2 doses of epinephrine administered 10 minutes apart. Oxygen at 91%, up from 83 when we arrived on scene. IV established, fluids running. Moderate respiratory distress continuing but improved from initial presentation. The doctor nodded, already examining Tyler as they wheeled him through the doors. "We'll take it from here." "Good work." Anthony joined them, helping guide the stretcher. In the bright lights of the emergency department, Devin could see that Tyler's face was still swollen, but the blue tinge to his lips had faded. The boy's eyes darted around, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. "You're at the hospital now, Tyler," Devin said, walking alongside the stretcher. "These doctors and nurses are going to take really good care of you." They reached a treatment room where more staff waited. With practiced efficiency, they transferred Tyler from the ambulance stretcher to the hospital bed. A nurse immediately connected him to their monitoring system, while another adjusted his oxygen. "Mom can come with us," the doctor said, gesturing for Tyler's mother to enter the room. "We'll need to know exactly what he ate and his complete medical history." Tyler's mother looked back at Anthony and Devin. "Thank you," she said simply, her eyes shining with tears. "We're just doing our job," Anthony replied with a small smile. "Tyler's in good hands now." As the treatment room door closed, Anthony and Devin stepped back, the familiar wave of post-adrenaline fatigue washing over them. For several minutes, they'd been completely focused on keeping Tyler alive. Now that he was safely transferred to the hospital team, they could finally take a breath. "Think he'll be okay?" Anthony asked quietly as they walked back to the ambulance. Devin nodded. "His numbers were improving. Kids are resilient, and we got to him quickly." They began the process of cleaning and restocking the ambulance, working in comfortable silence. Each had their own way of processing the stress of critical calls. Anthony tended to grow quieter, more introspective. Devin preferred to talk through it, but knew his partner well enough to give him space first. As Anthony wiped down the stretcher, his phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket and frowned at the screen. "Everything okay?" Devin asked, noticing his expression. "Just a news alert," Anthony replied, showing Devin the phone. "There's some kind of commotion back at Maple Park. Police presence reported." Devin raised an eyebrow. "Where we just were? Huh. Maybe someone got hurt at that birthday party." Neither man could have guessed how the events at the park had escalated after their departure. As they finished restocking their supplies, preparing to head back to the station to complete their paperwork, they had no idea that what awaited them would change not just their shift, but their lives. A nurse appeared at the ambulance bay doors, waving to get their attention. "Tyler's asking to see you guys," she called out. "Doctor says it's okay for a quick visit. He wants to thank the men who saved his life." Anthony and Devin exchanged surprised glances. This wasn't common. Usually, once they transferred care, they rarely saw their patients again. "Well," Anthony said, a small smile breaking through his fatigue. "That's an invitation I can't refuse." As they walked back into the emergency department, neither paramedic had any reason to suspect that the calm after their emergency response was merely the eye of a storm and that they were about to be thrust back into its fury. The visit with Tyler was brief but meaningful. The boy was already breathing easier, the hospital staff having administered additional medications to reduce the swelling in his airway. His mother stood beside the bed, her face showing the particular mix of exhaustion and relief that Anthony had seen countless times in his years as a paramedic. "Thank you for saving my son," she said, her voice steadier now that the worst had passed. "Just doing our job," Devin replied with a warm smile. "But it's always nice to see our patients doing better." Tyler, still unable to speak much through his swollen throat, gave them a weak thumbs up. As they walked back through the emergency department, Anthony's radio crackled to life. "Dispatch to Unit 17. Anthony exchanged a glance with Devin before responding. "Unit 17, go ahead. We've received reports of another medical emergency at Maple Park, possible related to the earlier call. Police are on scene requesting medical assistance." Devin frowned. "That's strange. The party was breaking up when we left. Maybe someone else ate something they were allergic to?" "Unit 17 responding," Anthony replied into the radio. "We're leaving Children's Hospital now. ETA 10 minutes. They hurried back to the ambulance, Anthony sliding behind the wheel while Devin checked their supplies. "We might need to restock epinephrine when we get back to the station," he noted. "We used both doses on Tyler." "There should be another set in the backup kit," Anthony said, starting the engine. "Check the lower compartment." As they pulled away from the hospital, the sun had fully set, leaving the city bathed in the glow of streetlights. Anthony activated the lights but held off on the siren, not wanting to add to the noise pollution unless necessary. The dispatcher hadn't indicated the second call was life-threatening. "What do you think is going on?" he asked Devin, who was still inventorying their supplies. "Not sure," Devin replied. "But that police presence Anthony saw on his phone alert might be related." 10 minutes later, they pulled into Maple Park. The scene had changed dramatically since their earlier visit. 3 police cruisers were parked haphazardly near the pavilion, their blue and red lights casting eerie shadows across the playground equipment. A small crowd had gathered, keeping a wary distance from the officers. "Something doesn't feel right," Anthony muttered as he parked the ambulance. They grabbed their bags and approached cautiously. An officer stood with his back to them, speaking to a group of agitated parents. Anthony recognized one woman as having been at Tyler's birthday party. "Excuse me," Anthony said, addressing the officer. "We're the paramedics. Dispatch said there was a medical emergency?" The officer turned sharply, his hand instinctively moving toward his belt. Anthony felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the one that came whenever he dealt with law enforcement while in uniform. Even after 15 years as a paramedic, wearing the uniform didn't always override other people's perceptions. "Who called you?" the officer demanded, his tone suspicious. Devin stepped forward, his medical bag clearly visible. "Dispatch said someone needed medical assistance. We just transported a child from this location to Children's Hospital for a severe allergic reaction." The officer's posture relaxed slightly, but his expression remained wary. "We've had reports of suspicious individuals at the park. Someone claimed people were putting something in the food at a birthday party." A murmur of disbelief ran through the crowd. The woman Anthony recognized stepped forward. "That's ridiculous," she said firmly. "These are the paramedics who saved Tyler. There wasn't anything suspicious. The poor kid ate a cookie that had peanut butter in it by accident." Another officer approached, older and with sergeant stripes on his uniform. "What's going on here, Officer Reynolds?" Before Officer Reynolds could answer, a call came from across the park. "Medical help! We need help over here." Anthony and Devin didn't wait for permission. They moved past the officers, heading toward the voice. Near the park's restroom building, they found a teenage boy sitting on the ground, holding his arm against his chest. "What happened?" Devin asked, kneeling beside the teen. "I fell off my skateboard," the boy explained, wincing. "I think my wrist is broken." Anthony set down his bag and pulled out a pen light. "Let me take a look." As they began assessing the teen's injury, Anthony was aware of Officer Reynolds approaching behind them, his footsteps heavy on the paved pathway. "I need to see some ID," the officer said, his voice carrying an unmistakable edge. Devin glanced up, confused. "We're in the middle of treating a patient. Can this wait?" "No, it can't wait," Officer Reynolds insisted. "We've had reports about people matching your description. I need to see identification now." Anthony felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. He'd been here before. The sudden demand for ID, the implied suspicion, the interruption of his work for reasons that had nothing to do with his job performance. "Our ambulance is right over there," Anthony said calmly, pointing toward their clearly marked vehicle. "Our station IDs are in our wallets in the cab. We can show you after we've stabilized this patient's injury." The teen looked between the paramedics and the officer, his expression growing anxious. "They're just helping me, sir. I called for a medic." Officer Reynolds seemed unmoved. "Step away from the boy, both of you." "With all due respect, officer," Devin said, continuing to examine the teen's wrist. "We can't abandon a patient. That would be negligence. If you want to verify our identities, you can radio dispatch or check our vehicle." The situation escalated rapidly. Officer Reynolds unclipped his radio and called for backup, while continuing to demand they stop treatment. The older sergeant was approaching now, looking concerned at the direction things were taking. "What seems to be the problem, Reynolds?" the sergeant asked, taking in the scene. "These individuals are refusing to identify themselves," Officer Reynolds stated. "And they won't comply with orders to step away from the minor." Anthony took a deep breath, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Sir, we're the paramedics from Station 12. We're treating this patient for a possible broken wrist. We cannot legally or ethically abandon care once we've started treatment." The sergeant looked between them, his expression unreadable. "Reynolds, did you check their ambulance? It's parked right over there." "I need to see actual identification," Reynolds insisted. "Anyone can drive an ambulance." The absurdity of the statement might have been funny in any other context. Anthony and Devin exchanged glances, a world of shared experience passing between them. This wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. "Sergeant," Anthony said, "I understand the officer's concern for public safety, but my partner and I are in the middle of patient care. We've been paramedics in this district for 12 years. Many people here know us, including the mother of the boy we just took to Children's Hospital." The crowd that had gathered began to murmur more loudly. Phones had appeared in many hands, recording the confrontation. The teenage patient looked increasingly distressed, both from his injury and the situation unfolding around him. "He needs medical attention," Devin said firmly. "His wrist shows signs of a possible scaphoid fracture, which needs proper immobilization to prevent long-term complications." Officer Reynolds stepped closer. I said, "Step away from the boy." Last warning. What happened next would later be replayed thousands of times on social media. Officer Reynolds moved forward and physically grabbed Devin's shoulder, pulling him away from the patient. When Anthony stood to intervene, Reynolds unholstered his taser and pointed it at him. "On the ground now, both of you," the sergeant called out. "Reynolds, stand down." But the younger officer seemed locked in his own reality now, convinced he was dealing with a threat that didn't exist. "We're unarmed paramedics," Anthony said, his hands raised, voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "We're just doing our job. On the ground." Reynolds repeated. Slowly, painfully aware of the dozens of eyes watching and cameras recording, Anthony and Devin complied, lowering themselves to their knees and then lying face down on the park's dirt path. The teenage patient scrambled away, cradling his injured arm, his face a mask of confusion and fear. "Why are you arresting them?" "They were helping me." Officer Reynolds handcuffed both men while the sergeant radioed for their supervisor. The cold metal of the cuffs bit into Anthony's wrists, a sharp contrast to the warm evening air. Beside him, he could hear Devin's measured breathing, a technique they'd both learned to stay calm during high-stress emergencies. Except this wasn't the kind of emergency they'd been trained for. From his position on the ground, Anthony could see the crowd growing larger. People were shouting now, demanding answers, filming everything. The sergeant was on his radio, his expression grim as he watched his subordinates' actions spiral out of control. "This is wrong," someone called from the crowd. "They saved a child's life here less than an hour ago." Anthony closed his eyes briefly. 15 years of service, countless lives saved. None of it mattered in this moment, erased by assumptions and fear. "It'll be okay," Devin said quietly beside him. "The truth will come out." Anthony wanted to believe him. But as they lay there on the ground, their patient left untreated, their dignity stripped away in front of the community they served, he wondered if anything would ever really be okay again. What neither of them could have anticipated was how the community would respond in the next few minutes, an extraordinary show of solidarity that would change everything. The crowd that had gathered around the scene grew larger by the minute. What had started as curious onlookers had transformed into concerned citizens, their voices rising in protest as they watched two paramedics lying face down on the ground, handcuffed. "They saved my nephew's life," a woman shouted, pushing to the front of the crowd. "They're paramedics, not criminals." Officer Reynolds stood over Anthony and Devin, his hand resting on his holstered taser, seemingly unmoved by the growing anger around him. The sergeant, however, was on his radio, his expression increasingly concerned as the situation spiraled. The teenage boy with the injured wrist had been pulled aside by another officer, but he kept looking back at the paramedics, confusion and distress evident on his young face. "They were just helping me," he repeated to anyone who would listen. From his position on the ground, Anthony could feel the rough texture of the dirt path pressing against his cheek. His shoulders ached from having his arms pulled behind his back, the handcuffs digging into his wrists. Next to him, Devin remained silent, his breathing steady, the same controlled rhythm he used during their most stressful emergency calls. "This isn't right," someone called from the crowd. "I'm recording all of this." Indeed, at least a dozen phones were held aloft, capturing every moment of the confrontation. The blue and red lights from the police cruisers created a surreal flashing effect, highlighting the faces in the crowd, faces filled with outrage, confusion, and determination. A man stepped forward from the gathering. He wore running clothes and earbuds hung around his neck, as if his evening jog had been interrupted by the commotion. "I'm Dr. Thomas Chen," he announced. his voice carrying the kind of authority that made even Officer Reynolds turn to look. "I'm a physician at County General. These men are licensed paramedics. I recognize them from the ER." The doctor approached carefully, hands visible. "Officer, I understand your concern for public safety, but these paramedics were treating an injured minor. By forcing them to abandon care, you may be creating a liability issue." Officer Reynolds' jaw tightened. "Stay back, sir. This is a police matter. It's also a medical matter," Dr. Chen replied calmly. "That boy needs treatment." He gestured toward the teenager. "If the paramedics aren't allowed to help him, then let me. I'm a licensed physician." The standoff continued for several tense seconds. Then from behind the police cruisers, a new voice called out, "Reynolds, what the hell is going on here?" A police lieutenant had arrived, her expression thunderous as she took in the scene. She approached quickly, waving for the officers to make way. "Lieutenant Rivera," the sergeant said, relief evident in his voice. "We've had a situation that's escalated." "I can see that," she replied tersely. Her gaze moved from the handcuffed paramedics to the crowd of angry citizens, many still recording with their phones. Then she spotted the ambulance parked nearby, its emergency lights still flashing. "Are those paramedics?" "Yes, ma'am," the sergeant confirmed. Officer Reynolds believed they might be connected to suspicious activity reported earlier. Lieutenant Rivera's expression darkened further. "Based on what evidence?" Officer Reynolds straightened his posture. "Ma'am, we received reports of suspicious individuals. Those paramedics saved my son's life an hour ago." A woman pushed through the crowd, Tyler's mother still wearing the hospital visitor badge on her shirt. She must have returned to the park after the emergency. They took him to Children's Hospital for a severe allergic reaction. "I just came back to get our car, and now you're arresting them? For what?" The lieutenant took a deep breath, visibly processing the situation. She turned to Officer Reynolds. "Uncuff them, now." "But Lieutenant, that's an order, officer." For a moment it seemed like Reynolds might refuse. Then slowly he knelt beside Anthony and removed the handcuffs. Another officer did the same for Devin. Both paramedics rose carefully, rubbing their wrist where the metal had cut into their skin. "Are you all right?" Lieutenant Rivera asked them. Anthony nodded, his face carefully neutral despite the anger and humiliation burning inside him. "Yes, ma'am. We still have a patient," Devin said, immediately looking for the teenager with the injured wrist. Dr. Chen had already moved to the boy's side and was examining his arm. The lieutenant turned to address the crowd. "Folks, I apologize for this misunderstanding. These paramedics are legitimate emergency medical professionals. Please give them space to do their jobs." But the crowd wasn't so easily dispersed. A middle-aged woman stepped forward, her phone still recording. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was profiling, plain and simple. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the onlookers. The energy had shifted from shock to something more purposeful, a collective indignation that demanded acknowledgement. Anthony and Devin exchanged a brief glance, then moved toward the injured teen. Their training kicked in, pushing personal feelings aside to focus on patient care. As they approached, Dr. Chen looked up. "Possible scaphoid fracture," he reported, seamlessly transitioning to a medical handoff. "No neurovascular compromise, but he needs proper splinting and an X-ray. Thanks." "Doctor," Devin said, kneeling to open his medical bag, which had been knocked aside during the confrontation. As they began treating the teen's wrist, Anthony became aware of something extraordinary happening around them. The crowd hadn't dispersed as ordered. Instead, they had formed a loose circle around the paramedics and their patient, creating a buffer between them and the police. Some people had linked arms, while others simply stood with their phones raised, documenting everything. "We're not leaving until they're done," someone declared firmly. Tyler's mother had joined the circle too, her face set with determination. "These men are heroes," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "My son could have died today if not for them." Officer Reynolds had retreated to his cruiser, but the lieutenant and sergeant remained, conferring quietly as they watched the impromptu community shield form around the paramedics. Anthony focused on splinting the teen's wrist, his hand steady despite the chaos of the past 15 minutes. "This will stabilize the injury until we can get you to the hospital for x-rays," he explained to the boy. "Try to keep it elevated." "I'm sorry they did that to you," the teen said quietly. "It wasn't right." Anthony managed a small smile. "Not your fault, kid. We're just glad we can help you now." Once the wrist was properly immobilized, Devin helped the teen to his feet. "We'll need to transport you to the hospital. Is there a parent or guardian we can contact?" "My mom's on her way," the boy replied. "She texted that she's 5 minutes out." As if on cue, a car pulled up to the park entrance and a worried-looking woman rushed toward them. The crowd parted to let her through. "Ryan!" "What happened? Are you okay?" She embraced her son carefully, mindful of his injured arm. "I fell skating," he explained, then added, "These paramedics helped me, but the police, they handcuffed them for no reason, Mom." The mother looked around, taking in the scene, the police cruisers, the crowd of neighbors forming a protective circle, her son's splinted arm. "What on earth is going on here?" Lieutenant Rivera stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Rivera. There was an unfortunate incident, but we're sorting it out now. Your son needs medical attention for his injury. We can transport him to the hospital for x-rays," Anthony offered. "Or you can take him yourself, but he should be seen tonight." While the mother decided what to do, Dr. Chen approached Anthony and Devin. "I've already called the hospital administration," he said in a low voice, "and the mayor's office. This kind of treatment of medical personnel is unacceptable." Devin nodded his thanks. "We appreciate the support, Doctor." "It's the least I can do," Dr. Chen replied. "I've been in similar situations myself." The unspoken understanding passed between them, the shared experience of being viewed with suspicion despite their credentials, despite their uniforms, despite the lives they'd saved. After Ryan's mother decided to let the paramedics transport her son to the hospital, Anthony and Devin prepared the stretcher. The crowd maintained their protective formation, accompanying them all the way to the ambulance. As they loaded Ryan into the back, Lieutenant Rivera approached. "I want to apologize personally for what happened here," she said. "It was unacceptable. I'll be launching a full investigation." Anthony met her gaze directly. "Thank you, Lieutenant. But this isn't just about us. This is about trust. How can we do our jobs if the people we're trying to help don't trust us to show up without being harassed? Or if we don't trust that we can do our jobs without interference," Devin added quietly. The lieutenant nodded, the weight of their words clearly registering. "I understand, and I promise you, this will be addressed." As they prepared to leave, Tyler's mother approached the ambulance. "I just want to say thank you again," she said. "For everything. My son is doing well. The hospital says we can take him home tonight." She handed them a small piece of paper. "This is my number. If you need a witness to what happened here or anything at all, please call me." The gesture, simple yet profound, nearly broke through Anthony's professional composure. "Thank you," was all he could manage to say. As they closed the ambulance doors, Anthony caught a glimpse of the scene they were leaving behind. The crowd remained, some talking to the lieutenant, others still recording. Officer Reynolds sat alone in his cruiser, staring straight ahead. And throughout the park, people who had been strangers an hour ago now stood together, united by what they had witnessed and what they had chosen to do about it. "Ready to go?" Devin asked from the driver's seat. Anthony took one more look at the community that had risen to defend them, then nodded. "Yeah, let's get Ryan to the hospital." As the ambulance pulled away, neither man spoke for several minutes. There would be reports to file, statements to give, perhaps even legal matters to address. But in this moment, driving through the quiet streets with their patient safely in the back, they allowed themselves to feel something that had been briefly taken from them: their dignity as professionals, as men who had dedicated their lives to saving others. What had happened at Maple Park would not be forgotten. Not by them, not by the community, and not by the systems that had failed them tonight. The path to healing and change had begun, written in the faces of neighbors who had refused to look away, who had stood together and said, "This is not acceptable. Not in our community. Not to these men. Not today." 6 months had passed since that evening at Maple Park. The summer heat had given way to autumn, then winter, and now spring was breathing new life into the city. Anthony stood at the edge of the park, watching children play on the same playground where Tyler had nearly lost his life, where he and Devin had been handcuffed on the ground. So much had changed since then. The video of their detainment had spread across social media within hours. By morning, it had been picked up by national news outlets. Anthony remembered turning on his TV the next day. Strange to see his own face looking back at him, Strange to hear anchors discussing what had happened to them. "You coming?" Devin called, pulling Anthony from his thoughts. Anthony nodded and followed his partner toward the pavilion where a crowd had gathered. Not an angry crowd this time, but a celebratory one. Colorful balloons bounced in the spring breeze and a banner hung across the pavilion entrance. Community Unity Day. "There they are," someone called out as they approached. A path opened up through the gathering, and Anthony felt a wave of emotion as he saw familiar faces. Neighbors, patients, colleagues, all smiling and clapping as they walked through. Tyler spotted them from across the pavilion and ran over, completely recovered from his allergic reaction. "Anthony, Devin, Mom made your favorite cookies," he announced, pointing toward a table laden with food. Tyler's mother embraced each of them. "We wouldn't have missed this for the world," she said. The story of what happened that night had taken on a life of its own, but unlike many such stories, this one had led to actual change. The morning after the incident, Lieutenant Rivera had shown up at their station, not with platitudes but with action. She'd brought the police chief and the mayor, who listened as Anthony and Devin recounted their experience. "I need you both to know," the chief had said, "that what happened was unacceptable. Not just because you're paramedics, but because no one deserves to be treated that way." The wheels of accountability had turned surprisingly quickly. Officer Reynolds was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. But what had impressed Anthony most was what happened next. Instead of defensiveness or denial, the department had reached out, asking for input on how to improve police emergency services relations. "Never waste a crisis," Devin had said when they discussed whether to get involved. "If they're actually willing to listen, we should talk." And so they had. Weeks of meetings followed, some tense, some productive. Anthony and Devin shared their experiences not just from that night but from years of service. The subtle and not-so-subtle ways they'd been treated differently. Questioned more, trusted less, despite wearing the uniform of public servants. Now, 6 months later, they were seeing the results. A new training program had been implemented for both police officers and paramedics, focused on communication during emergency responses. More importantly, a community oversight board had been established, including residents from all neighborhoods in the city. Ryan, the teenager with the broken wrist, waved to them from across the pavilion. His cast was long gone, his arm fully healed. His mother stood beside him, chatting with Dr. Chen, who had become an unexpected ally in the push for change. The doctor had used his position and privilege to amplify their voices, opening doors that might otherwise have remained closed. "Anthony, Devin, we need you for the photo," called the community center director, waving them toward the front of the gathering. As they made their way through the crowd, Anthony felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Lieutenant Rivera. "I just wanted to check in," she said. "How are things at the station?" "Better," Anthony replied honestly. "The new dispatch protocols are working well. Having medical calls properly flagged has made a big difference." She nodded. "Good, and personally," Anthony considered this. The truth was complicated. The incident had left scars, moments of hesitation when approaching certain situations, a heightened awareness when in uniform outside the hospital or station. But there had been healing too. "Some days are harder than others," he admitted, "but knowing that something good came from what happened, it helps." The lieutenant's gaze was direct, understanding. "The new officers coming through the academy are studying what happened that night, not just as a cautionary tale, but as a lesson in community impact. They're learning that our actions have ripples that extend far beyond a single interaction." Before Anthony could respond, they were called again for the photo. He and Devin stood at the center of a group that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago. Paramedics, police officers, doctors, patients, neighbors, all gathered under that banner of unity. As the photographer counted down, Anthony reflected on the strange path that had led here. He'd joined emergency services to help people, to save lives. Never had he imagined becoming an unwilling symbol of something larger, or that his worst professional moment would somehow lead to his most meaningful impact. Later, as the celebration continued, Anthony found himself sitting at a picnic table with Devin, watching the community they served enjoying the spring day. "Remember what you said in the ambulance that night?" Anthony asked. "When we were lying on the ground?" Devin raised an eyebrow. "I said a lot of things. You said the truth will come out. And you were right. Devin smiled, though his eyes remained serious. I believed it then. Had to believe it. But I didn't know how it would happen. None of us did, Anthony agreed. But all those people with their phones out, they made sure the truth couldn't be buried. They watched as Tyler played tag with other children, darting between tables with the boundless energy of youth. His mother had become one of their strongest advocates, speaking at city council meetings, organizing community forums. Her son's near-death experience, followed by witnessing their detainment, had awakened something in her, a determination to make the world better for her child. Officer Reynolds had eventually been reassigned to desk duty after the investigation. Anthony had seen him once months later, at a mandatory joint training session. There had been an awkward moment of recognition, a nod of acknowledgement but no words exchanged. Some healing would take longer than others. Excuse me. A young woman approached their table. Are you the paramedics from the video? The ones who saved that boy with the allergy? Anthony nodded, used to this question now. I just started EMT training, she said. Because of you. Because of what I saw that day in the park. I want to be part of the solution. After she walked away, Devin smiled. That's the 12th one. 12th what? The 12th person who's told us they joined emergency services because of what happened. Anthony shook his head, still amazed by the ripple effects of that evening. What had been traumatic and humiliating had somehow become inspiring to others. The narrative had shifted from victimhood to empowerment, from division to unity. As the afternoon drew to a close, the community gathered one last time. The mayor presented them with a commendation, but more meaningful were the words of Tyler's mother. 6 months ago, these men saved my son's life, she said, her voice steady and clear. Then they showed us all what real courage looks like, not just in emergencies, but in the face of injustice. They could have walked away angry. Instead, they stayed and helped us build something better. Anthony felt Devin's hand on his shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of how far they'd come, how far they still had to go. The setting sun cast long shadows across Maple Park as people began to disperse, carrying leftovers and new connections. Anthony and Devin walked back to their car slowly, stopping to chat with neighbors and colleagues. Same time tomorrow? Devin asked as they reached the parking lot. Wouldn't miss it, Anthony replied. Tomorrow they would be back in their ambulance responding to calls, saving lives. The work continued. But it was different now. They were different. Their community was different. A single moment of injustice had not defined them. Instead, they had redefined it, transformed it into something powerful and healing. As they drove away from Maple Park, Anthony glanced in the rearview mirror at the place that had changed everything. The pavilion was still visible, the Unity banner fluttering in the evening breeze, a reminder that sometimes the most important lives you save aren't just the ones you treat in the back of an ambulance, but the ones you touch by standing up, speaking out, and showing what true service really means.